G'day, welcome to Little Mirrors. I'm Iolanthe.
And I'm Yule.
And today we're going to be talking about the new Borat film on Amazon Prime, which is called officially...
Oh, we're just going to call it Borat Subsequent Movie Film because it's...
It has a lengthy title.
Yeah.
So please know before you begin watching today's recap that it is probably going to have spoilers in it. We're not intending to spoil, but if you haven't seen it yet, please do. It is very much worth signing up to Amazon Prime to watch. We liked it that much, and we're going to share with you the reasons why we thought it was such a good film today. So this is the first of our actual media Little Mirrors. Until now, we've been reflecting mostly on two key themes of reflection, which are about our impending parenthood and about how we're balancing that with our businesses and how we hope that they will both projects will flourish. But the other half of Little Mirrors is sharing with you media and cultural content that has been influencing us, and this is our first crack at it. So we'd like to, I guess, begin by talking about the category of satire more generally, which Borat falls into. Yul, would you like to begin?
Yeah, so I think we've been watching a few different reviews about the film, and the way that a lot of people have responded to it is primarily focused on whether they find it funny or not, and also by comparing it to the original film. And which we find to, not to be invalid, but to not also be the main point of the Borat films and Sacha Baron Cohen's work in general as a satirist, and the way that comedy and satire particularly is almost always, well, it's always of its moment.
It's not an evergreen thing, satire. It's not something that, when you look back at it in 20 years or even I think it's been 14 years since the original Borat film came out, the immediacy of that project of satire, it's not going to be the same. And yes, it can tell you things about a period of time. It's a time capsule. But I don't think that reflecting on which Borat is the better Borat is maybe that useful a project.
No. I think the question of how effective Borat is as a character in telling, making the points that the film sets out to, is a valid question.
Yeah.
And I think that that's quite well handled by, initially it does, the film deals with that by putting him into Borat, like an extra layer of impersonation, effectively, where he's a character within a character. And wearing Borat wears disguises as different kinds of American archetypes, I suppose. But bringing in the character of his daughter is actually the protagonist of the film, and Borat is really a secondary character in his own film, which works well. And a lot of his story takes place not in public. It's they're just very character scenes focused on Borat himself in a particular spot, and doesn't really require as much buy-in from the people he's interacting with in the real world. Most of that work is handed over. The heavy lifting of that is taken up by his the character of his daughter.
Yeah. So one recent review that we actually heard yesterday, which if you listen to Slate Culture podcast, that was just featured, and we found that the reviewers were focused, as you'll said a bit earlier, on A, how funny it was in terms of laugh out loud humour, and B, how it compared to the first. If you hear barking, that is our charming dog Wagner. He is a anxious toddler dog. So he's evergreen though. So
he's evergreen.
He features.
He's going to age well.
If you hear barking, it's just Wagner. So, I would say, generally, I feel that in terms of satire, the second film seems to deal more powerfully and painfully with current issues, current political issues, than the first did. What do you think?
I think the first was almost as effective. I think a lot of people, like, so I'll preface this with, a lot of people feel like the first film was maybe better, but I think that has more to do with the way they felt about it at the time. It felt very fresh and confronting, and the character of Borat was new to most of its audience, and so they've got very long held feelings and views about the character and that particular film. And it's always hard coming back with a sequel using the same character many years later, and it doesn't really work. Particularly one which is kind of taking the mickey out of everyday people, so that it relies on people not knowing who that character is or who that person is in the world. So it's like, can you pull the same magic trick twice, is the question that people are asking themselves, which I think is not the point. The point is, can this character still operate to illuminate the issues that they do, through that character, at this day and age? And I think it does.
The role of Borat is really a key archetype in narrative. So he could be understood as a fool, he could be understood as a clown, and he could be understood as a jester. So we've seen different Borats in all kinds of stories, from the fool in Lear through to the idea of the court jester. And the jester allows us as an audience to feel safe initially, because we feel that there is a big social gap between the fool and ourselves as the learned audience. The clown is often an
unfortunate.
Is a character that's kind of pitiable. He's not privy to the same knowledges that we have, and he's not threatening. So that allows both gotcha moments, like those ones in the earlier Borat films, from unsuspecting members of the public, which could be seen at, like, I guess, the cheaper end of the clowning scale. But it also allows spaciousness for us as an audience to be able to... Well, we don't feel vulnerable, but we're...
No, but it recontextualizes the social interaction that's happening on screen, because the clown, the person playing the character of the clown is someone who is who we perceive as socially distant from ourselves. They're an unfortunate. They're not in possession of the same information we are. Maybe usually there's things are happening. I'll just wind this back a little bit. I was unaware of what a clown really was until I went to a traditional circus about 20 years ago, and they had a clown. And in that case, I was surprised at how funny it was and effective it was as a medium of entertainment and comedy. And that really gave me a lot more context around the role of a clown traditionally, which is, I think, our culture and people of our generation and even the generation before us weren't really exposed to that. So most of our cultural understanding of clowns is they're creepy, you know, and a lot of that comes out of John Wayne Gacy and It, and Stephen King, and killer clowns, these people dressing up as freaky clowns and scaring people on trains. It's become a trope, but that's not what a clown originally was, and it's not why. It's actually the non-threatening nature of a clown was what was played upon in those other contexts. So the idea that John Wayne Gacy was a he did all the clown shows for the kids in his neighborhood. He seemed really non-threatening, is what made him his crime so shocking. And the same with It. It takes that form to disarm children. That's not what a clown originally was. A clown was someone, a character that's non-threatening,
a mirror,
is non is pitiable. So, and we as an audience are in possession of knowledge that he can't, that the clown is not. So we kind of feel sorry for them because they're always struggling with something, struggling to get their head around some problem, and there's something else going on behind their back. And like Mr. Bean is a good example of a clown. And that's kind of the basis that we that's what Borat is. Borat is a clown in that traditional sense. He's not in possession of all the cultural knowledge that we are.
He's naive.
He's naive. He's not from an upper social class, and also he's kind of sits outside of our culture altogether by coming from Kazakhstan and literally playing on our own ignorance of Kazakhstan. He can create a character that bears no cultural resemblance to people of that country in general. But that framing of using a clown to then reveal things about our own culture, absurdities within our own culture, is what aligns it more with Shakespearean use of the fool in those plays which you were talking about with King Lear. Now, everything that happens in a Borat film, all of his interactions with Americans, is to reveal things about their own culture that they may not have questioned. And with a lot of that is, we find cringy.
Uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, and it can be funny, but the kind of funny that it generally is cringe humor. It's satire. It's a lot of people can take a high level of offense from that. But he's coming at it. His character is coming at it from a place of, ignorance, really.
And that allows curiosity to come in to the way that he interacts with the real world Americans in Borat, both the first and the second. So the kind of laughs that you should be looking for in Borat, the second movie, is not it's not a laughter that's kind of it's not a comforting laughter. It's a kind of laughter that is actually a symptom of you feeling like a boundary is being pushed against, and that's why we think that this film has great utility and is really effective. But it's not like a laugh out. You can't expect the lolcats from this. It's not comfortable viewing, I'd say. But this also got Yule and I, when we were preparing notes for today's vlog, it got us thinking about the role of satire. Obviously, we've just spoken in a really brief way about the role of the clown, the fool, and the jester, but also about the role of satire and if it's dead. I used to be a really big fan of Saturday Night Live, and then I really loved the characterizations of Sarah Palin and of Hillary Clinton. I really liked it. And then I read an article about whether or not Saturday Night Live actually, was it bread and circuses? Was it just playing to the audience that it already had? Did satire play a role anymore? Is satire dead? Yule, what do you think of?
I don't think satire is dead, but I think it's a lot harder to discern from fake news.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot harder to, I think we, because of the way that our bubbles, our information bubbles work these days, with the algorithms controlling everything we get through social media, and that's how most people get their news, and that's how a lot of people find out about what to watch and what they might be interested in. It's feeding you what it wants you to, what it thinks you'll already like. Now, satire, by its very nature, is supposed to challenge the things you like, the things you believe, the way you see yourself.
The status quo.
And that kind of rubs against the kind of information that we're being fed. And it's very difficult to discern between what's fake news, where it's designed to elicit a response for a very real, to support a particular political view in general, and something that's trying to use comedy to also change your view on a particular thing. They perform very similar roles, fake news and satire. But the problem is because fake news is much more prevalent than really good satire, a lot of people misinterpret satire as being real at this day and age. So it's not dead, it's just harder to discern as satire. And people who engage with satire and understand that, okay, this is trying to talk about a particular topic in a metaphorical way, is a very different audience and very different way of engaging with media than the most people that fake news is designed for.
Yeah, I think that some of the hallmarks of satire, I'd say, at least for me, I feel that satire is good when I am probably feeling on some level, well, discomforted, but a bit almost defensive about my response to the media. It's working because it's actually asking me to question, why am I feeling uncomfortable about this? And is it should I be feeling uncomfortable about this? That's when it's effective, because you're reflecting on your own emotional response to a proposition. And I suppose that it's most obvious in the second Borat film. There's a particular scene where Borat and his daughter are at a debutante ball, which is a rite of passage. And it's kind of on one level, it's really civilized. It has, this particular debutante ball has a purity ball quality to it. So there's this idea of the father introducing the daughter who has come of age, and she's now a woman. And Baron Cohen inserts his character into this situation as somebody who aspires to be part of this gentility. But like great clowns, he gets it wrong. How does he get it wrong, Yule?
He interprets the way that the men, these elder statesmen sort of men, are treating their daughters as selling them off. So he asks one of the men how much he'd pay for his daughter. And
the father responds that he'd pay, without missing a beat. He knows exactly what the character is asking. He says he'd pay about $500 for his daughter, and that gentleman's own child expresses to her father how disgusted she is with his behaviour. So there's that, but there's a further, and I guess the biggest misinterpretation is when the Borat character and his daughter choose to share their own interpretation of a coming of age ritual, which is kind of like a moonblood dance that they. It's
not the point of the dance is not moonblood.
No,
she's like, I can't do it because it's that time of the month for me, and he encourages her to do it anyway, because he doesn't want to be embarrassed in front or let down the people in the audience, because each of these fathers and their daughters are having a dance. They get a moment to have each couple of them is announced, and then they dance, and then it's the next father-daughter pairing. It's their turn to have a dance, and so just prior to it being Borat and his daughter's turn to take the floor, she tells him that she's menstruating, and he says, let's go ahead with it anyway.
And then there's like this dance where it's majorly cringy content, and like she's dancing, and it's really clear that she's bleeding, that she's got her period, and the response from the hall of the people observing them reflects your own. You begin to feel all these horrified, cringy kind of qualities. And I was sitting there, I was thinking, oh, are we laughing at the fact that she's got her period and she's gross? Oh, on one level, on the most surface level, you could say, yes, that's why you're initially giggling. But I'd say that what you're being asked to interrogate is these two different kinds of rituals around coming of age, and is one any more civilized than the other? And I guess at the heart of this video, I think we are positing that that Borat is an exploration of what civility looks like. There's the civilized that we're used to, but is it actually any less atavistic? Is it actually any less animalistic than that of the Kazakh, than that of the for want of a better word, the uncivilized, the the native who hasn't learned the social rules. And I think that's where this gets interesting.
Yeah. So I think another example of that, which is a lot more literal, is where at the beginning of the film, Borat meets his daughter, and she expresses to him her disappointment of being, I think, 15 years old and not having been married off yet, so that she can get the married woman's cage, like her ex frenemy or something like that, and then they cut the camera to her friend who's in a married woman's cage, which is a nicer cage, but she's pulling the finger at her friend, like, look at me, I'm so much better than you. And then so that the purpose of that is obviously to look at the way our own society treats women and the roles that we expect women to fall into, and how they basically compare to men, like.
And I think that this film feels far more feminist in focus than the first Borat film.
Absolutely.
What would you say the key themes of the first Borat film are?
And the key themes were more about it was interrogating class more generally, across race lines, but also I think there was a lot of focus on the Southern gentry and their facade of genteel culture than there was in this film. I would say that a lot of the interrogation of race through both films seemed to be more focused on anti-Semitism than it was black, Native
people of color.
People of color in general. It was more he really, being a Jew, he's more interested in anti-Semitism. My vibe.
Yeah. Another example of looking at social mores around civility is one which is really most critical at the moment, I think, with the potential advent of Roe versus Wade in America being deconstructed further. And it was where Borat and his daughter go to a women's health clinic. It's not family planning though. It's like it's an extension of a church health clinic, and they effectively express to the doctor there that she's pregnant, she's underage, she wants an abortion, and that the child is a child of incest, right? So,
and also there's parental consent to the abortion.
There's parental consent to the abortion, and it's, on one hand, it's horrifying to see the character of Borat and his daughter, Tuta, expressing this story, but it's actually more horrifying to see the doctor say that it doesn't really matter how we've got here. The most important thing is that there's a baby involved, and he wasn't going to offer an abortion, but nor was there any suggestion that he was going to go to the authorities about illegal incest. And I think that felt really shocking, because it seemed more appropriate and civilized to him to value the life of a potential life rather than identifying that somebody is in an abusive familial situation. Yeah. So that's another way of looking at civility that is presented in the film. But I think that the most vibrant and poignant scene in the film is actually at its closing.
Yeah. So after examining American culture for the previous 90 minutes, the last scene of the film is Borat and his daughter are both jointly reporting on this cultural event that had previously been the running of the Jews
in
Kazakhstan, but now they've because they've realized that anti-Semitism is not good. Instead, it's the running of the Americans.
Yeah.
And there's a man and a woman in a similar style costume of like a giant egg shaped.
Yeah.
caricature of American man and woman, and then a third American character comes out, which is ostensibly it's Dr. Fauci in the same style of caricature, coming and trying to inoculate them with the COVID-19 vaccine, and they the other two American characters beat him and break his needle, and saying a lot about like the cultural values of America and its anti-vaccine stance and its anti-science stance. Not obviously that's not all Americans, but in general in Trump's America that is a major problem. And just it's revealing these sorts of things, but in terms of the actual narrative of the story about Borat coming to terms with his daughter being equal to him, human, and entitled to her own, dreams and career aspirations and these sorts of things. Him embracing that at the end, I think, is what, for me, gave this story a much better arc, and also as a way of really contextualizing the first film and giving that a better arc as well, by comparing these two scenes between the two films, and closing off Borat's story from being an ignorant to being quite enlightened.
Yeah, so I actually felt it felt quite, despite not despite, it's satire. It's gross and it's uncomfortable. It is a very poignant way of looking at current political circumstances in the West and looking at a world in pandemic. And I think that's something that's quite telling about where we were in 2006 and where we are in 2020 is Kazakhstan's response to the media.
Yeah, and I think that's a good the example of Kazakhstan in 2006 really hating the film, hating the way that they were portrayed by Sacha Baron Cohen in the first film, and really trying to distance themselves from, Kazakhstan's not like that at all. We're much better than that, and they really hated it and rejected the identity that was projected upon them. But then now, recently, with the release of this new film, they've adopted "very nice" as their
the tagline for their tourism campaign.
Yeah,
and that's a really big shift. And I think that in terms of looking at Borat as a clown who enables different peoples to look at their own kinds of civility, he's a very positive character that is executed at some risk to the actor himself, and is a really great cipher through which to look at some of our own tensions as cultures that are becoming increasingly incivil. So that's our wrap up of Borat. We don't have a star system. We haven't worked out if we're going to have a star system. Would you like one?
I would like a star system.
Yeah, and what should we like give it? Like what should start? We really like pickles.
No, not pickles.
Okay, not pickles.
Pets. Like what? Is it a cat or a dog?
Dog.
Okay.
So, how many?
We give this 4 Wagners.
We give it 4 Wagners out of 5. Yeah, it's really very good. We think it's sophisticated, just like our dog Wagner.
Yes.
Yeah, so 4 out of 5. We hope that you enjoyed our review. We're going to get better at these as we go along, we think. But yeah, we welcome any comments that you have about your own thoughts of civility, clowning and satire. And yeah, we'll see you next time on Little Mirrors. I'm Iolanthe.
I'm Yule.
You're out.
Bye.